Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something a lot of people feel but just can't quite put a name to. It's called public image sculpting. Think of it as this invisible architecture of control, one that gets built when a public persona is manufactured with painstaking detail, often with some really damaging results for the people living in its shadow. We're going to break down how it's done, why it's so effective, and what it actually feels like to be on the inside.
So let's just start with the most striking truth about this entire dynamic, a quote that really cuts right to the bone. The more perfect a person appears to the world, the more leverage they have to be toxic behind closed doors. I mean, we're all kind of taught to believe that a person's reputation is a fair judge of their character, right? We see a respected community figure, a brilliant visionary, a beloved head of the family, and we just assume the person we see out there is the same person behind closed doors. But in these really high-pressure situations, that saintly persona can be so much more than a good image. It can become a structural weapon, designed to make any other version of the truth sound completely unbelievable.
And that leads us to this central, just maddening question we're digging into today. Why is it that the person everyone else seems to love is often the one that you are the most afraid of? How can the individual that everyone praises for their generosity or their wisdom be the source of your own private fear? Look, this isn't just someone being two-faced. This is the whole engine of public image sculpting. It's that moment when your own community, your friends, their collective respect for this person gets turned into the very weapon that silences.
All right, so to really wrap our heads around how this works, we've got to break it down. Here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the paradox of perception. Then we'll deconstruct how that perfect facade is built. After that, we'll map out the three-step silencing pattern before digging into the psychology of immunity versus belonging. From there, we'll get into some practical tools with an audit for awareness, all leading to our final point, reclaiming your unvoted truth.
So, let's jump in with Section 1, the paradox of perception. Now, it's really crucial to get this straight. We are not talking about simple hypocrisy. I mean, we all act a little different in public than we do at home. This is about a systemic, strategic misuse of social trust, where the goodwill and social capital someone earns in public is actively and intentionally weaponized behind closed doors.
And before we go any further, just a quick but really important note. What we're doing here is exploring an observable pattern of interaction based on reported experiences. We are not here to diagnose anyone. Our goal is to analyze a process, a repeatable, identifiable process that can trick our own brains into making a critical mistake, confusing social capital with actual moral character.
Okay, that brings us to Section 2, building the perfect facade. So social capital is the weapon. How is it actually made? How is this public masterpiece put together? And what are the specific gears and levers that make it so believable to everyone on the outside? Well, there's a formal term for this, and it's strategic self-presentation. This isn't some fringe idea. It's a well-documented process in behavioral science. It's when someone consciously, actively manages every single thing the community sees about them. And the goal is simple, to build an idealized public image that isn't just impressive, but is also a shield. And this isn't just theory, right? We see these patterns show up again and again in very specific, high-pressure environments where one person holds a ton of social power. You know, think of those charismatic leaders whose goodness is never questioned, or those high-flying corporate visionaries whose success basically gives them a moral pass, or even in those really enmeshed family systems where one person's public image dictates the private reality for everybody else. The common thread? A power imbalance that's held up by public perception. So this slide really lays out the two opposing forces at play here. On one side, you've got what you might call authentic consistency, the ideal, right, where who you are in public and who you are in private are more or less the same. Then on the other side, you have the core of what we're talking about today, reputational insulation. This is where that public image isn't a reflection of the real self, it's an intentional shield built to protect it. So how does this shield work so darn well? One of the main psychological tricks is something called the halo effect. It's a powerful shortcut our brains take. When we see someone who is incredibly charming or successful or publicly generous, a little halo literally forms around them in our minds, and we just automatically assume they must be good in every other way too. We think, oh, someone that beloved couldn't possibly be cruel. It's a powerful and, as we're about to see, a really dangerous assumption. Now, for a second, let's turn to the person on the receiving end of this. The one trapped inside the controller's perfect public image. Their experience is just profoundly isolating. There's a name for it, reputational dissonance. It's that bizarre, maddening feeling of living a double life.
You experience the private reality, but everywhere you look, you're faced with a public perception that has nothing to do with it. You know what happens when that door is closed, but you also carry this heavy weight of knowing that nobody would ever believe you over the saint they all admire.
And this brings us to a really critical reframing of this whole idea. The public image, as this quote says so perfectly, isn't just a passive mask someone hides behind. It is an active defense system. It's a social fortress, built brick by brick with public praise and approval. And like any fortress, it's designed to keep threats out. But the dark irony is that for the person trapped inside with the controller, that fortress is also a cage.
So how is that cage loft from the outside? Well, that brings us to Section 3. And honestly, this is the tactical heart of our explainer. There is a systematic, repeatable, three-step pattern that is often used to completely dismantle a person's credibility and isolate their voice. Let's break down the silencing pattern.
So the pattern unfolds in three very distinct stages. It's a process. First, the controller creates a saintly baseline, this unshakable public reputation. Then, with that in place, they deploy a tactic called Pre-emptive Credibility Stealing, basically poisoning the well against their target. And finally, these two steps lead to the checkmate move, Epistemic Invalidation, where the target's own truth is rejected by the very people they might turn to for help.
Let's look at step 1, the foundation of this whole thing, the saintly baseline. This is the long game. This is where the controller builds this long, visible, highly public track record of good deeds and charitable acts. They're essentially banking social credit, creating a reputation so large it feels impossible to challenge. The image becomes so spotless, it feels unassailable. And tragically, a lot of people in this situation report that during this phase, they actually felt lucky to be connected to someone so respected.
And then comes the brilliance and truly insidious second step, Pre-emptive Credibility Stealing. Once their own reputation is solid, the controller starts to confide in mutual friends, expressing concern about you. They might talk about how stressed you've been or how unstable you're seeming. It's all done under this mask of caring, but it's a purely strategic move. It pre-frames any future complaint you might have, not as a valid report, but as just another symptom of your known instability. They're literally stealing your credibility before you ever get a chance to use it.
And those first two steps lead directly to the final move that seals the trap, epistemic invalidation. Epistemic is just a fancy word for related to knowledge or truth. So this is the moment your knowledge, your lived-in truth, is completely invalidated by your community. When you finally speak up, they don't believe you. And why would they? Your story directly contradicts the polished hero story they've already bought into. Your truth just sounds less plausible than their image. And in that moment, the community becomes an unwitting, unpaid bodyguard for the controller. The psychological toll of living inside this cycle over time is it's devastating. It can lead to something called narrative overriding. This is where the external story, the one that's reinforced by everyone around you, starts to literally overwrite your own internal story. Your brain, just trying to make sense of the conflict, can become conditioned to see public approval as objective truth. And your own private experience, which has no outside validation, starts to feel like a subjective delusion. You genuinely begin to question your own sanity.
So, this brings us to Section 4, immunity versus belonging. Now that we kind of get the how, let's explore the why. What's the psychology driving all this? What motivates someone to build such an elaborate social fortress? And what deep human need makes someone else feel like they have to stay inside it? Well, it really comes down to this fundamental clash between two powerful drives, the controller's quest for immunity and the target's need for belonging.
For the controller, the psychological jackpot is the ultimate form of power, total accountability immunity. Just think about it. If you can completely control the public story, if you are the only author of how reality is seen by everyone else, you have absolute leverage. You become immune to consequences for what you do in private because you systematically made sure that no credible witness can ever exist against. Now, this entire system is made possible by a psychological skill we all have. It's called impression management. It's our basic ability to manage how people see us. But in this dynamic, that skill is sharpened to a razor's edge. It becomes this ability to completely separate one's public utility, their value and charm to the community, from their private character. They can be one person in public and a totally different one in private, with no visible internal conflict.
Okay, so let's flip the coin. What's the vulnerability that's being exploited? It's one of our deepest, most primal human needs, the need for social belonging. Being kicked out of the tribe is, on a deep level, terrifying. In this dynamic, people can be slowly conditioned to value their reputation and their spot in the community more than their own lived reality. The fear of being cast out becomes greater than the pain of what's happening behind closed doors.
And this slide just lays out that central conflict so clearly. It's a psychological vice. On one side, you have a person driven by the goal of total immunity. On the other, a person driven by the fundamental need to belong. The truly insidious genius of this system is that it's designed so these two needs are in a direct zero-sum conflict. For the controller to have their immunity, the target has to sacrifice their reality.
Okay? Just understanding this pattern, just seeing the architecture for what it is the most critical first step. So for our fifth section, let's shift from just explaining the problem to providing some tools for recognition. This isn't about telling anyone what to do. It's about offering a way to find clarity, how you can start to conduct an audit for awareness, and reclaim your own perception of reality.
And this is so important to remember. The process of reclaiming your reality rarely starts with some big, dramatic showdown. It begins inside. It starts with a quiet, private, and just brutally honest audit of the facts as you have experienced them. It's about consciously setting aside a protected space in your own mind for your own observations, a space that is totally free from the noise of public opinion.
And that whole private audit can often be boiled down to one single core question. It's simple, but it is an incredibly powerful way to cut through all the confusion. Just ask yourself honestly, does the saint that everyone else sees out in public, do they actually exist when the door is closed? Is the public performance consistent with the private reality? The answer to that question, that's your anchor.
And from that core question, we can build out two really practical tools for reclaiming your own sovereignty. The first is to just formalize that question. Conduct a private public discrepancy audit. Actually write it down. Compare the public persona with the private actions. And the second is to consciously develop what we can call independent anchor awareness.
So let's zoom in on that second tool for a second, because it is absolutely vital. Independent anchor awareness is all about strategic connection. You know, when you're in a boat being tossed around by the waves of a manipulated story, you need an anchor on solid ground. This means intentionally keeping up relationships with people who are completely outside the controller's sphere of influence. These people, these anchors, can give you an unbiased reflection of reality when your own has been dangerously warped.
This quote really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The real work is to fully internalize this truth. The audience's opinion does not change the reality of the performance. Their standing ovation, their applause, their admiration for the lead actor, none of it changes what's actually happening backstage. Your experience is real, regardless of who's watching or what they think they see.
And that realization brings us to our final and maybe most important section, your unvoted truth. After all the analysis, after looking at the patterns and the psychology, after the audit, what is the ultimate path to getting your sovereignty back? Well, it's about fully and unapologetically recognizing the authority of your own perception.
Let's start this final section with a really powerful metaphor. You know, we think of cages as being made of iron bars, but in this world of public image sculpting, the things that look like success and validation from the outside, that's often what the bars of the cage are made of. We have to remember, the most dangerous cages are often the ones made not of steel, but of other people's applause.
And if there is one core lesson to pull from this entire dynamic, it's this. Public performance, no matter how good it is not a reliable measure of private character. True integrity isn't about what people do in the spotlight when everyone's watching. It is, and it always will be, about what happens when they think no one is watching.
So how is this powerful cycle finally broken? The key insight is that it's not broken by trying to convince the audience to change their minds. That's a losing battle against that fortress of reputation. The cycle is interrupted from within. The entire house of cards, which seems so solid, can collapse in an instant. The moment an individual realizes they are not obligated to protect a mask that is being used to suffocate them. And so we will leave you with this final empowering thought. After all the complex analysis of social capital and public perception and cognitive biases and community opinion, the most crucial takeaway is also the simplest. Your truth does not require a majority vote to be real.